welcome back. And today we're going to be making braised short ribs. So first thing is your braising liquid and actually braising your short ribs. So one large onion, and we're just going to kind of chop this into medium dice, nothing too crazy. At the end of the day, this is being braised. We're going to actually strain out all these veggies. So in terms of precision cuts, take your time. It doesn't have to be perfect. So you're going to need one large onion. You're going to large dice that. 2 cloves of garlic, 1 large carrot, and about a quarter bunch of parsley. I'm just gonna kind of chop this all into about the same size. That way it's cooking evenly. This is good for about 3 short ribs. These are beef short ribs. I look for something that has high marbling, so a lot of fat in there, and that's just gonna make a very tender piece of meat after you've braised it. Plus it's gonna be absolutely delicious. So peel your carrots, chop them up, everything more or less the same size. And that's all going to be put to the side, and then we're going to jump right into preparing the beef. For the beef itself, this has been sitting out at room temperature for about an hour and a half, so everything is tempered. You don't want this to be ice cold. And we're going to heavily season it with black pepper. I mean, a lot of black pepper. And we're going to be pretty aggressive with the salt as well. This is because this is going to be our major seasoning for the sauce and the beef itself. So don't be shy. This is supposed to be peppery, it's supposed to be a little salty, it's okay. So go ahead and be aggressive with it. Make sure you're doing every side, and then you're gonna pat that in as well at the end. Make sure you get it everywhere. And you're gonna put your beef into a heavy bottomed pot. So I'm using just a Le Creuset, and we're gonna put in some neutral oil, and we're going to sear this, and we're gonna heavily sear this. We're gonna try and build a crust. This is gonna create flavor for the braising liquid, as well as on the beef. So we're gonna do 2 sears at the end. So one at the beginning and one at the end. So the first one, and we're going to kind of rotate it. We wanna get it nice and brown, and we're gonna repeat this with all of them. Each side, get it nice and brown, and then we're gonna take it out, and we're gonna repeat it with the other ones. Do be careful not to crowd your pot, because what you're gonna end up doing is steaming the short ribs rather than searing them, which is exactly what you don't want to do. So go ahead and rotate it. This is gonna add a little bit more browning, add a better crust. You wanna render out a lot of that beef fat, and you can see it already collecting at the bottom of the pan. And we're gonna do this with all 3 of them, and we're just gonna keep doing it. It turns out that the last 2 were a little smaller, so I threw them both in there, and they seared perfectly fine. There was no steaming, but of course, be careful. You don't want to steam your short ribs. You want to sear them. And here you can see how much fat is actually collected at the bottom just from rendering the beef. You're going to want to remove some of that. It's a lot, but save it. At the end, we're going to use it, so do save it. It's peppery, it's beef fat, it's delicious. Don't throw it away. So go ahead and remove some of that fat, and we're going to go ahead and start to saute all those veggies that you had cut earlier. So go ahead and throw everything in at the same time. We're gonna stir this around, and we're just gonna get them a little translucent, a little soft. We're not looking for anything too crazy. And then we're gonna go ahead and add in our beef, kind of wiggle it in there. We're gonna add all of them in, and then along with your beef, we're gonna add in 1 cup of red wine and about 3/4 of a quart of stock. Here I'm using chicken stock with a little bit of mushrooms. You can use beef stock. I just want something a little lighter, not too crazy heavy, especially since we're in the middle of summer. Maybe in winter, a little beef stock, make it a little richer. But 3/4 of a cup of chicken stock. Make sure everything comes to a boil or a simmer before closing it and covering the lid. If not, you're gonna take a lot longer to actually braise this. So we're gonna go ahead and add everything in, make sure it all comes to a boil before covering it and reducing the heat. And we're gonna let this simmer for about an hour to an hour and a half. We're not gonna look for falling off the bone completely. We want a little bit of texture still there. And in the meantime, we're gonna make a part of the sauce slash one of the accoutrements, if you would. They're just black cherries, and we're gonna pit them. If you have a pitter or a cherry pitter, good for you. You won't stain your fingers. If not, just cut around in a circle around the cherry, around the pit. And by just twisting them, you'll remove half of it with no pit, and the pit will stay in the other half. Super easy. It's gonna stain your fingers, so it's okay. It will come out. So go ahead and do that. You're gonna need about 1.5 cups of cherries. So go ahead and just twist it, and you can see here you're left with the pit in one side. On the other side, you're left with no pit. And we're going to then just remove the pits from the pitted side, and it's just stick your nail in there and pull it out. It's super easy. If they're ripe, it comes out super easy. If they're a little less ripe, you have to do a little more work, as the pit is a little more stuck to the flesh itself. And half of these we're going to use raw, and the other half we're going to make a gastrique or a jam out of them. So 1 cup of these pitted cherries are going to go into a sauce pot with a half cup of sugar. And we're going to add in as well a 1/4 cup of water and 1 lemon worth of juice. And this is going to go onto the stovetop on medium heat until it's nice and jammy and reduced. In the meantime, while that's reducing, we're going to just chop these other cherries real thin, and these are going to kind of be used for a salad that we're going to put on top of the short ribs. So just nice and thin, kind of make them a little smaller so that they're bite-sized, if you would, or they could fit on a spoon. And along with your short rib, I'm going to do a little bit of some corn. It's corn season, so this is just melted butter with a little bit of yeast. So it's about 1 stick of butter to a 1.5 teaspoons of dry yeast, just warmed up, and a little salt added. We're going to brush this all over the corn, and we're going to throw this corn under the broiler. We're going to let it cook that way. We're going to get a nice char, a little bit of browning. The yeast butter is great. It adds a little bit of tang. It's real fun to use. Makes it a little more funk, if you would. A little more salty, a little more cheesy. It's absolutely delicious. If you haven't tried doing this, it's great. So go ahead and throw it under the broiler, and every once in a while you're going to kind of roll it out, and we're going to coat it with some more of that yeast butter. You're going to repeat this process, continuously rotating your corn as it goes. That way you get even cooking. Just kind of brown it a little bit. It's going to get nice and sweet as it kind of loses a little bit of moisture in those kernels. This only takes about 10 minutes under the broiler, so do keep an eye on it and don't burn it. And here is that cherry jam or gastrique. You can see it's reduced quite a bit. It's nice and jammy. We're going to put this to the side, and we'll use that a little bit later. So it's been about 1 hour and 20 minutes since we've put these in. You can see how much they've shrunk just by cooking. And we're going to go ahead and take these out. They're nice and tender. You can see that they've kind of absorbed a lot of that red wine, so they got a little darker. We're going to take this out of the sauce pots. We're going to let these rest on a rack in the meantime. And if they fall off the bone, they fall off the bone. It's totally okay. I like to serve it on the bone, just the aesthetic look of it. It just looks a little cool. So we're going to then add in a couple of those cherries that you've cooked. Just add a little sweetness to the sauce. We're going to let that reduce for about 5 minutes. And then we're going to strain this off. So we're going to remove all the veggies. We're going to strain this off, and we're going to keep all of that braising liquid. Don't throw it away. It's gold. And from there, we're going to reduce this braising liquid by about 3/4 of its original volume. Get it nice and thick, almost a heavy sauce, if you would. Do not season it at this point, because as you reduce it, a lot of that salt is going to concentrate as it loses liquid. So all that salt that you used to season the beef at first is in this liquid, and as you reduce it, it's going to get saltier. So do keep an eye on it. Don't season it now. If not, you're going to have a very salty sauce. And we're just going to add a little bit of the liquid from those cooked cherries, just add a little bit of sweetness and a little bit of a tang. So we're going to let this reduce about 15 to 20 minutes. Keep an eye on it, because it will burn if it reduces too much. And in the meantime, we're going to actually second sear our short ribs. So into a skillet goes a neutral oil. I'm using grapeseed oil. Get it nice and hot, and we're going to throw in the braised beef, and then we're just going to get a little crust. We're not looking for anything crazy. We're just trying to get a little bit of crust, add another texture to the short rib. It's nice and soft inside. Add a little bit of a crunchy crust out on the outside, and we're just going to sear this. This is really quick, 10 minutes maximum, if not 5. You can see here they start to caramelize all that sugar that's been on there from the wine and all the veggies. Add a little bit of butter to the pan, and we're just going to baste this quickly. And that's it. And of course, again, as always, we're going to let the meat rest after taking it out of the skillet. Once it gets a nice crust, that's it. out of the skillet it goes, and we're gonna let this rest for about 5 minutes. So once you've seared them, let them rest, and we're going to then coat them with your reduced braising liquid. So here you can see how much it's reduced. It's nice and thick. It's a little sweet, it's a little salty. We're just gonna kind of coat these guys with that sauce, and we're gonna let them rest for at least 5 minutes. This is gonna let them get that juice back into that center, so when you cut them, they don't bleed out. You have a really dry short rib, so you're just gonna let this rest. Don't touch them, please don't. And while those are resting, you're gonna go make a little bit of a salad. So these are pea tendrils. We're gonna add in those raw cherries that you cut earlier. Along with that, we're gonna add in that beef fat that you've saved. It's nice and peppery, it's salty, it's delicious. So this is gonna be your oil for your salad. And then for your acidity, you're gonna take some of that cherry juice from when you reduce those cherries. And we're gonna add a little bit of that in, and we're gonna mix that all together, and we're gonna check for seasoning. Do be careful because that beef fat is a little salty, because when you seared it, there was quite a bit of salt on those short ribs. So do taste it for seasoning, and then you can add in a little bit of more beef fat, a little more cherry, and kind of go from there. And after that, it's time to plate. Go ahead and grab your short rib, place that on the plate, and we're gonna add in a little bit of that braising liquid, because why not? It's delicious. So go ahead and just throw a nice big spoonful of that right on top of your short rib. And then just to add a little bit of brightness and acidity, because this is quite heavy, we're gonna add in your cherry pea tendril salad. So go ahead and just place that on top. This is just gonna add a little bit of texture, tang, and hot and cold, it's absolutely delicious. And then of course, your piece of corn. Don't forget that. Put that to the side. You can take it off the cob, you can leave it on the cob, and just finish it with a little bit of that melted yeast butter. And that is it. Super easy. Takes about an hour and a half to make. Don't really have to think about it. Great for weekdays when you don't have a lot of time, kind of do it on the weekend. This holds great. And it's super easy. It's absolutely delicious. If not, shred it and make it and put it in a taco, even better. But thank you so much for watching. We hope to see you next time. If you enjoyed the video, please go ahead and give it a like, subscribe, and we'll see you all next week.